Hey, just a heads up that the following content may be disturbing or triggering for some listeners and is not appropriate for children. Please take care of yourself and others who may be listening with you. Welcome to the Bonus Babies podcast, a show that has no easy answers, only hard questions.
The one thing that I've always known and even felt, even though I wasn't with her, is that I know my mommy loved me. It's like I always knew that.
Can you tell me what you call the kids who you've cared for over the years?
We feel that the children that we receive coming into our home are bonuses. So we call them bonus babies.
I love that. This is your host, Jayne Amelia Larson, and I'm a CASA volunteer, a court-appointed special advocate for youth in foster care. Yeah, I know it's a mouthful. In the same way a CASA works, I explore all things in the foster care maze by talking to kids, parents, caregivers, attorneys, social workers, therapists, anybody and everybody who will speak to me to keep the conversation open and the information flowing about all things CASA. My guest today is the lovely Jaronna Yates. Jaronna is from a family of 5, but her mom, at the age of 26 with 5 little kids, was just not equipped to take care of them. So they ended up in an orphanage and then split up into foster homes, and back at the orphanage and other foster homes, and then back with a mom and then not. It was a rough and rocky road for Jaronna, and she's willing to tell us about it. Hi, so I'm here with Jaronna Yates. Hi, Jaronna. Thank you for being on my podcast.
Hi, Jane. Thank you so much for having me.
So, especially now in the time of COVID, we haven't seen each other for a really, really long time. I know you from Peace for Kids. We worked together maybe a few Saturdays or maybe a year of Saturdays. I don't even know anymore. It's a blur, right?
Yeah.
But that's been since last March. So it's nice to be able to talk with you again. I appreciate that you are at Peace for Kids. I think it's a really important organization. I like to get the plug in whenever I can. So tell me a little bit about who you are. What's your background? How were you raised? Where are you from?
Well, I am from Kentucky. I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, originally born in Lafayette, Indiana. And I am one of 5 children. I'm the middle child.
I'm one of 10.
Wow.
That's right. So my dad
Wow.
said that's a good start, but really. But 5, that's a big family.
Yeah. So I had a little unconventional background where from an early age, around about 6 years old, I was in an orphanage and eventually was placed up for adoption and lived in foster care for many years.
And can you tell me a little bit about that orphanage?
Yeah. It was a Catholic orphanage and it was run by nuns. It wasn't your typical orphanage where all of the kids there no longer had family. It was more of like a home where kids lived there during the week and then went home on the weekends. And I think it's because a lot of the parents just needed the help. When I went there, I went with me, my oldest sister, and my younger sister, my younger brother, my little brother. We all went together when I first went, and we were split up into different departments. I was in what is known as the little girls department. My oldest sister was in what is called the big girls department, and my younger sister and my little brother were in the nursery area.
Well, I'm sure it wasn't like Bloomingdale's or something, right? So it's interesting to have those terms.
Yeah, I guess it was just the best way for them to segment which nun would care for them.
Mm-hmm. And how did you feel when you first showed up there? What was the place like? Did you know what was going on?
I didn't completely understand what was going on and why we were going there. I will say it helped a lot that my oldest sister was there. It's like this big, huge mansion that's tons of acreage, grounds, and I had no idea what was going on. We were the only Black kids in the place.
So everybody else was white?
Every single person was white, from the office staff to the nuns to the priests to everyone was white.
Right. And why were you sent there? You couldn't stay with your mom?
No, my mom, for many years of her life, she suffered very bad clinical depression. Sorry, this story makes me cry. She became a mother at a very, very young age. She was 16 when she had my oldest sister. And by the time she was, I don't even know how old she was, maybe 26, she had 5 kids.
Wow, so much responsibility.
Yeah.
So many demands on a young woman.
Yeah.
Especially one that was hurting.
Yes. And I think she had reached a really, really bad critical point. And the story I've been told is that she walked from where we were living at the time. She just walked all the way to the orphanage. And I don't know how many miles for sure, but I know it was a great deal of mileage. And she rang the doorbell. Someone opened the door. And she just said, "Help me," and just fell. And so, I guess people found out who she was, about us, her kids, and I guess they offered to take us in at the orphanage.
Mm-hmm. And you stayed there on the weekends.
Yeah, most kids went home on the weekends. We did not always go home on the weekends. It was just really hard for my mom, and
she must have missed you terribly too, right?
Oh yeah, my mom. The one thing that I've always known and even felt, even though I wasn't with her, is that I know my mommy loved me. That's like, I always knew that.
Right. Can you tell me about some of the staff or the sisters?
Yeah. Well, like I said, Sister Elodia was the sister that was over the little girls department. And my youngest sister came down to the little girls department because it's like an age range of where you are. So she came down pretty quickly after we'd been there for a little bit, and she loved us very much. And to me, she was like really, really tall woman. She wore the habit and everything. And her sister was the one who looked over the big girls department, Sister Nunello. And it's funny, they spoke Latin to each other when they didn't want to
really
want us to hear what we're saying. They spoke Latin to each other.
Cool.
And I just remember, I guess, me being so small, she looked like she's about like 8 feet tall. Mm-hmm. But, she was a real strong woman. But she really took a special interest in caring for me and my sister. And I want to say she sometimes gave us special treatment, I think.
Yeah.
And I think she just felt for us so much. And
did you sleep? Did you sleep alone in a bed? Like, how did it work? Because you must have been so lonely at the beginning, especially.
Yeah. So how the sleeping arrangements were, it was a big dormitory. So there were like rows of beds, and each girl had their own bed. I remember you had a bed, you had a chair next to your bed, and Sister Elodia slept right off of where we all were sleeping.
So she was close. If she heard a ruckus or if somebody needed help, she would...
Yeah, and people would knock on her door and we'd get scared or something, like, "Sister Elodia," and...
Have you ever been in touch with her since then?
It's interesting. Right before I moved out to California, I don't know, something just told me to just go see her. And she was at, I forget what they exactly called it, but I called it like the nuns' home. When they get elderly, they go to this place and they're cared for. And I found out where she was, and I was like, I have to go see her before I leave for California. And she had an oxygen tank at the time. She was like in a wheelchair, and they had her sitting at this table. And I remember I was like feet away from her, and she just saw me coming to her, and she just said, "My Lance!" That's what she used to always say, "My Lance!" And it just made me cry because she knew exactly who I was after all these years.
And she probably raised hundreds of children, right?
Hundreds of children, yeah.
Yeah.
Because before we went there, it used to be like an actual orphanage where kids had been put up for adoption, and they used to wear uniforms. By the time I got there, we got to wear regular clothes, but we wore uniforms to school.
So then, what happened to your family then? The 5 of you, and how did that play out? Because I know you went a little bit back and forth to your mom's and to also to the foster homes, right?
Mm-hmm. So during the time that we were there, I was there from about age 6 to about age 11. is how long I was in the orphanage. And there was about a year of that time where I went to live with a family friend of my mom's. I still don't know the reason why it was me, why I was chosen to go. But I remember I had met her, when I was little. I don't know if it was orphanage had something to do with trying to find me a place to go. I don't know. But I was about 8 years old. And I went to live with her. And while I was there, like my oldest sister had already aged out. So after 8th grade, you're not able to stay at the home anymore. You have to leave because they only allow you to stay up until what our school that we went through was to 8th grade. So she had like aged out. And so she had actually gone back home to live with my mom. Which was a really hard time for her because I think she ended up being my mom's caretaker.
That's a lot for a little kid.
She was even like our caretaker a lot growing up too.
Sure. Yeah, as I said, I'm from a big family, and my sister tells a story about how one of her girlfriends asked her, "What kind of dolls did you play with when you were little?" And she said, "Dolls? We didn't have dolls. We had babies. we had little brothers and sisters, and whose diapers we changed and fed." So I'm sure that was probably true for your sister, and also true for you, right? Because you looked after your little sister, right?
Yeah. We were very close in age, though. We were only like 17 months apart. So while I was there, my oldest sister, like I said, had already left. And my little brother, who was in the nursery at the time, his dad came to get him. And then my younger sister was the only one there left. And so my mom had married someone at the time, and they decided that they didn't want her there by herself, and so they went and got her to take her to live with my mom and her new husband and my oldest sister.
And did that work out?
Yeah, and then while I was there, it was found out that my brother wasn't being taken care of. He was just got like really sick, and so my mom ended up having him come back and live with her. And then she called me while I was living with this woman in Ohio, my mom's childhood friends. And I remember my mom calling me and saying that she wanted me to come home. And, of course, you always want your mom.
Yeah.
So I wanted my mom. I missed my sisters and my brother. And so I said, okay, I'll come home. We were living there, and then I remember this to be like Christmas morning, and I remember it was like really weird because I remember we had made a Christmas list. I mean, we had gone through like the Sears catalog, and like we had written all these things down on our list. And I remember we had gotten so many of the toys that we wanted this year, and it was like so awesome. And I remember this be Christmas morning, and we were sitting on mine and my sister's room. We were sitting on the bed, me, her, and my little brother. And I remember we were playing with toys, and my mom, she showed up in the doorway, and she had like this big knife in her hand. And she said, "Look what you've done to me. Look what you've done to me." And, she was crying, and we were like, what did we do? What did we do? We didn't know what we had done. And I just remember her face, and I could tell she was just so unhappy and just crying. And then my sister kind of showed up behind her, and my sister was like telling us, just come on, just run, and I remember, we were kind of scared, but my sister was telling us to just come run out the door and past my mom, and my younger sister went on one side, my younger brother went on one side, and I was trying to go, and my mom caught me, and she was, just screaming, "Look what you've done to me, look what you've done." And she was like going to stab me, and she was trying to stab me with the knife, and I was just pulling away, and like, "I'm so sorry, what did I do? What did I do?" And so the door to my bedroom and the door to my mom and her husband's bedroom was like right next to each other. So I was able to like kind of like, as she was holding me and grabbed me, pull also, go from one door to the other. And I remember I was asking him to like, get her off of me. And I remember he looked up. He was playing his guitar on the bed, and I remember he looked up and he just kind of like laughed and smirked. But eventually, he got up and pulled her off of me. And
You mean because he didn't think it was serious, or because he was just like fed up with the drama, or?
I guess at the time I didn't even care that that was happening to me. I just cared that my mom was so sad. Like something was so wrong with my mom, and
Yeah, you could see she was in real pain, right?
yeah, and I remember it was really, really cold, and my sister put the three of us, me and my little sister, my little brother, on the front porch right outside our apartment door, and then eventually she came and told us to come in, and we were kind of scared to come in at first, and she just said, it's okay, Mom is okay, and she wants to talk to you, and I remember she was laying in my sister's bed in her room, and we went in there and, kept saying, Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry what I do. We're so sorry. And that's when we were told that we were being put up for adoption, me and my younger sister, and that we'd have to go back to the orphanage. We have to go back to the home. We just kept wondering what it is that we did,
Yeah, when you're a little kid, you think it's your fault.
Yes.
Right? You don't know that it's not your fault, but when you're a little kid, that's what you think.
Yeah, and eventually it was explained to me that, she had a nervous breakdown. She wasn't coherent. She didn't know what she was doing. And it's really funny because I was always very serious as a kid, and I could always decipher what adults were saying without them saying it. And for a while, a long time, I really thought I had done something for this to happen. And I couldn't figure out what it was I did. And I think that at the time I was like, I'm just going to be so good. Any rules I had to follow, anything I had to do, I'm just going to be so good.
Yeah, you mentioned that you became super adaptable, right?
Oh, yeah.
That you were always the good kid and the one that was going to get along and not make a fuss.
Absolutely.
But that takes a toll, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. But once it was explained to me about my mom's nervous breakdown, she didn't know what she was doing. She loves us, and she didn't mean to that. I was okay about it. It was still painful to think about what happened, but once I heard that, I was like, okay, I understand. They explained to me that being depressed is a sickness. So once I heard that, I could deal better.
So you went back to the home.
Went back to the orphanage. It was empty, Christmas time. We were in the dining hall. Think of this huge long room with these long rows of tables. So the director of the home, she walks through and she's like, hey, girls. And then she was going to go to the kitchen, and then she just stops and she turns around and she screams so loud, like, what are you doing here? And we're just like crying, we don't know. I don't know. We don't know why we're here. And, we're just crying. And the secretary took us home with her and gave us a Christmas that year. And I'll never forget it. Her teenage daughters let us put on their clothes and play in makeup, and they had presents for us. And I just thought, how wonderful. These great people that are willing to do this for us. I was very grateful that we felt like we had somebody's home to go to that year.
You mean even as a child, you were thinking that consciously, that you had someplace to go?
Yeah, I remember being so thankful. And being raised by nuns, being thankful is a big part of how you're supposed to live your life,
Yeah, but it's also really nice for me to hear, and probably for others to hear, these nice stories about nuns, because nuns can get a bad rap.
Yeah.
You just really look at any movie, or if you listen to my sisters, they were terrified of the nuns in their school. They got rapped on the knuckles or on the backside.
Yeah, and some people did, but like I said, I was really, really good.
Right, and so do you think that was in part just the way you were born, or was that your great desire to fit in?
I think a little of both, actually. I did have that personality of always really trying to be good and do good in school, and I've always kind of had that personality because I've always been really sensitive to people. And I never wanted anybody to be sad. The most horrible thing that I felt like I could do was do something bad that they would yell at me. Yelling at me, that was probably worse than if I got a spanking.
Really, really, that was crushing if you got yelled at.
If I got yelled at, and if I felt like I upset someone enough to make them have to want to yell at me. I remember I was real sensitive like that.
So can you tell me about, there was a gentleman named Mr. R at the home, right?
Yeah, and we were told we were putting up for adoption, and when we went back to the home, we were told we were going to have to now go into foster care.
Yeah, did you understand what that was, or was that explained to
I
you?
had no idea what foster care was. I'd never heard of that before, and they said that we're going to have to start going to live with other families, and because we want to try to get adopted, we're going to now have to start going to be with Black families, because up until then, we really had no exposure to Black people other than my immediate family. And so they said that it would be like our friendly visitors. And what friendly visitors is what they called in the orphanages, like for kids like us who were like stuck at the orphanage on the weekends. And if they knew that we would be there for the weekend, sometimes they had these trusted homes where a family would just take us for the weekend to give us a place to go for the weekend.
Yeah, they have that here now. I have a friend in Los Angeles that does that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she does it through her church.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow,
And
okay.
it's basically to give like respite to families. She'll take kids for the weekend or week or whatever. It's usually the grandmom or something. It gives the grandmom a break. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there were these trusted friends.
Yeah, and they called them friendly visitors, and so that's how they explained foster care to us. Like when we go to friendly visitors on the weekends, only we would stay there until we get adopted.
And how did that work out?
So the first time we went to a family, and it was the mom and her husband, her daughter around our age, and they had another foster child there who was mentally challenged a little bit, and her son, she had an older son who was much older than us. And I remember we went to this house. I remember getting out of the car, and I was like, what is this place? It was this rundown, dilapidated house. And this was just a weekend visit to see how we liked it, I guess. I looked at our social worker and she said, it's okay. Their other house was burned down, but it's getting totally rebuilt. So this is just, for you guys to come here for the weekend. And it was horrible. I remember we had to take a bath in her daughter and her other foster daughter's dirty bath water, and it was lukewarm. And I remember we couldn't flush the toilet because the plumbing was horrible. Like, I don't remember what we ate, but I just remember I didn't like it. I couldn't wait to go back to the home. And then her older son, he, I guess, I don't know, just doing what older teenage big brothers do, I guess. And he was like really mean to us, and he locked us out of the house, and we were stuck outside. And I remember I was crying, and
He probably didn't want you there, too. That's maybe why he did it.
maybe I think there may have been a little jealousy there. But I remember we went back to the orphanage, and we were telling the social worker about everything that we experienced, and we were like, we're not going back there. Like, she made sure we didn't have to go back, but when she moved into her rebuilt home, it was nice. But when she moved,
But it was the same family.
it was the same family, so we had to go back there, and there was just so many bad things that were happening there, and I feel bad talking about her now because she's deceased, but I didn't like it. For Christmas, her daughter would get all these great things, and we get this little bit of stuff, and she'd always get these new clothes, and we barely got any new clothes. I remember I wore the same pair of pants, but 2 different days during the week. And I remember my one friend, she was like, didn't you have those on the other day? And I felt so horrified. And but it was not a good place at all. And her older son didn't get any better from that first weekend. And the other foster daughter, I think, is going on with her. The good thing is we had friends, down the street that we would go play with. But finally, our social worker told us that she wasn't going to be our social worker anymore. And we just felt that, oh no, somebody else is leaving us.
Yeah.
Situation. And then it was like, she's going to leave, we're going to be stuck here forever. I think we just had that desperation. And so we just told her everything that was happening, everything that went on. And she was shocked to hear it. And I think eventually this woman wasn't a foster parent anymore. And we got a new social worker, and this time was a Black social worker. She asked us if we remembered the man who was the groundskeeper at the orphanage. And I remember one year we actually went on a camping trip with their family. I guess they owned some land in Glasgow, Kentucky, and they set up all these tents. And I remember we had a lot of fun, and all the kids, I think we sang Elvira for like that whole weekend, like 1,000 times. But me, I was always been like really cleany and germaphobe, so it was like not taking a bath and having to use an outhouse was like disgusting to me. Like, because I remember one time I was like, I'm just walking across all the way to the cornfield to the house, to your uncle's house, and I'm using the bathroom. And so they asked us to remember the groundskeeper. I guess he had been asking about us, and he and his wife were interested in possibly adopting us. So from the first foster home we went to live with him and his wife, and it was much better. We had our own rooms. I had a bathroom in my room. I was like so excited. And, nice basement, nice big backyard. I mean, different. It was very, very diverse neighborhood. We were back in Catholic school, not public school. And his wife, she was really, really good to us. And I remember that one of the first things she did is took us shopping to go buy clothes. I'll never forget that. I remember because I was so happy to get clothes.
Oh, nice.
And we had good Christmas and everything. And then one day we were told that we were having to leave. And I think it's because they were getting a divorce. And they didn't want us to have to go through the divorce, I think, with them. And partly, too, I don't think she felt like she could take care of 2 kids on her own. So we were having to leave there. We were really, really sad about it because, we really liked her and we really liked living there. And
yeah, I just want to say one thing about this. This is really important for people to know that a person that doesn't know anything about what happens to kids who have spent time in foster care, they think they just go into foster care and then everything's okay after that. And maybe they just go into one home and then they get adopted. But the reality is that it almost never happens that way. They go from home to home to home, or in your case, to the home, to a home, to back to the home, back to your mom, to the home, to another home. It's just this hard and painful journey for a little kid.
Yeah. And I think that's part of made me like such a serious kid. I was so serious when I was young. And I think I felt like I had to protect my sister and take care of her, just make sure she was okay all the time. Part of it, too, is I felt like I had to understand what was happening, and the best way was just try to figure out what these adults were saying. And sometimes I felt like it was like, oh, okay, well, we found you a home, you're in foster care now. But it's just, unless you have a really, really good home that you're put into, you don't feel like supported. And if I didn't have my sister, I don't know how I would have made it.
Right, and then later on, you actually ended up with that woman, right?
Yeah. So, we left her home, and then we were separated into separate foster homes.
Oh, gosh.
Which was probably, to this day, that was one of the hardest days of my life. Having to drop her off and then drive away and go to another home to live. It was horrible. I'll never forget that day. I'll never forget that driving that car after leaving her at that house.
Yeah, man, that fucking sucks.
Yeah, it was hard. And I hated whoever made that decision. But luckily I was able to still see her. It was kind of a long walk to each other's homes, but...
Right, but you found a way to do that?
I did get to see her, and at first we were at separate schools, and they promised me we'd be at the same school, and at first we weren't, and I cried every day. So you said I would be at her same school, and so eventually we got to be at the same school, so we would meet each other walking to school. We were in counseling, and we had a really great counselor. She was amazing. I loved her, and she always said she would want to adopt us, but she just couldn't afford to adopt us. But
it seems like you guys made such a positive and warm impact on everybody that you met.
It's funny. I heard that a lot as I got older from people would say that to us because we were always a pair. It's like when people would say our names, they would always say them together. Like it was never, it's like.
Right, like you were a duo, huh?
Yeah, and one day we were in counseling, and she asked us, what would you do if you ever saw your mom again? And right away I knew. I was like, so how'd she find us? And she said, you know what, Jaronna, I swear I could never.
You knew, huh?
Yeah, she said, you always know what I'm saying. She thought I'm just going to just start telling you just from now on, just saying it outright to you. Because I did. As soon as she said that, I knew. But it was an interesting story. Later on, I found out from my mom that she had been looking for us for years, and that she was being told that they're already adopted, stop searching for them. Leave,
So she was lied to. She was lied to.
Mm-hmm. And as an adult, she also told me that she was tricked into signing over her rights for us. I just can only imagine how painful it was for her, because I know how painful it was for me. I remember anytime we would go someplace, I was always looking to see if I'd see my mom or my sister or my brother. I was looking for them every single time we'd ever go anywhere, just hoping one day I'd run into them. So what happened was we were considered hard to place adoptions because we were older, and they did this thing, Wednesday's Child, the news segment that shows kids trying to be adopted, and then they wanted to interview us for this newspaper, and we were like, not the Louisville newspaper, we don't want everybody to see us in the Louisville newspaper. So they said, okay, well, we have this Indiana paper, I think it's called The Voice. So we interviewed there, and they put a picture of us in there, and my mom she was remarried at the time. She said that they used to get that newspaper, but they stopped the subscription. And one day she went out to her front door, and the paper with us in it was left on her doorstep.
So someone left it there because they knew?
I think someone left it there. Uh-huh. I have no idea who. I don't know who would have known. I still try to figure that out, and I just don't know who would have known.
So then you ended up back with your mom?
So we ended up going back. She actually ended up having to adopt my sister back.
Wow. To
become her mother again.
I see.
Mm-hmm. I didn't want to be adopted back. Her husband at the time, I just didn't like him. And the very first time we went to visit, he got extremely upset because he said we didn't come to the backyard to say hi to him, and we didn't even know he was there. I was thinking about, why did that affect me so much? And I equated that to the very first foster care experience I had with the older kid when he locked us out and he was being real mean to us that weekend. And I think I just equated that first time experience together. And
Yeah, but also because it sounds unfair. He was angry with you for no fault of your own. You weren't
exactly.
You weren't purposely ignoring him. You didn't even know that he was in the backyard waiting for you.
No, we didn't. And
yet he held it against you.
Yeah. Right away, after that first visit, of course, they're talking about, placing us back in the home with my mom. And I was just hesitant, and it was because of him. Of course I wanted to be with my mom. I couldn't believe I saw my mom again, but it was just him. And I just knew in my gut it wasn't going to be a good experience.
How old were you then?
Oh, gosh, I was probably about 13, I think, almost 14 maybe. So right away we had to move in with them.
And it was a nice house, right? There was a yard.
Oh, yeah, it was really nice. He was a psychologist, and so, really...
He was a psychologist, huh?
Yeah, he was a psychologist.
And he was angry with you for whatever. Okay, anyway.
Yeah, there's a lot of undealt issues that he had from his childhood. And
of course.
Yeah, great house. Nice in-ground pool in the backyard, nice big home. It was beautiful. It was nice. Again, I think we were like one of the few blacks in the neighborhood. He was white. It's funny, all of our dads are black, but all my mom's husbands were white. So it's weird.
That's great. And how about your mom? How was your mom then?
My mom still had a bit of a depression. She was still really happy, but she still always seemed to have this sadness to her. And he was just a nightmare to live with. It was horrible. I really very rarely say I hate someone, but I hated him. I hated living there. I was on eggshells all the time. It was horrible. And so I think that's why I started this babysitting business in a subdivision across the main road that we lived near.
Right, so you became the baby whisperer, right, at 14?
Oh, yeah. I got hired to watch this couple's kids every day after school, so I would come and be with them, give them their snack, make sure they do their homework, and then eventually everyone in that subdivision was asking me to babysit on the weekends and even fighting over me and lying to each other about me. And I didn't realize it. But I've always been really, really, really good with kids and just love kids. And I was thinking about that, just this need for kids to be okay and kids to be happy. And I think it was from being in foster care, from going through what I went through. And there was this event that I went to when we were still in the foster care system, and I was about 9 years old. And I remember this little boy was acting up at the event, and I happened to be standing near this couple, and they were talking about the little boy. And I didn't hear what the man said, but I heard the woman, and she says, "Oh, well, he's just a foster kid." But the way she said it, and the look on her face, and just the judgment in her voice, and this is me like not even really still understanding what foster care was. I just said to myself, no one will ever say that about me that way, ever. And then I remember looking at the little boy, and as an adult, I can see he just needed attention and needed some care.
Yeah.
But as a kid, I looked at him and I was like, you know what, when I grow up, I'm going to make sure that foster kids know that they are just as important as anybody else. And I just remember thinking that to myself and feeling that in that moment. I was like, I'm just going to make sure that nobody thinks that they're better than foster kids, and that foster kids are just as important as anybody else. I remember that specifically. And it was because of what that woman said. And so we, even though we had gone back to our mom's house, we ended up actually leaving again, me and my younger sister. And
You left again? I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah. So we ended up moving with the groundskeeper and his wife that were going to adopt us, getting divorced. She was single now, but she ended up taking us in. And so we ended up living with her.
And what was her name?
For this, I'll call her Miss C.
Miss C. Okay. So she wanted you.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted you, really.
She's amazing. And to this day, we call her on the holidays, call her Mother's Day. When we go back to Kentucky, we visit her, we stay at her house. So she's still very much a part of our lives.
Right. And what was she like?
She was amazing. Total mother figure, and, loved to cook for us and wanted to give us the world, and did all that she could to do that. She was always that support, that rock for us.
Mm-hmm. And did you all ever end up back with your mom then?
We did. Eventually, one by one, we ended up moving out here to California. I've been here since early 90s, and we all ended up being together as a family with my mom. And she did get married out here again, and this time to a really great man who loved her and adored her.
Oh, nice.
Loved her and adored her unconditionally. My sisters actually still live with him.
Oh, how nice.
And she passed away in 2018, but we were all able to be there by her bedside. Luckily, it's turned out to be a good story. I mean, I miss my mom dearly. I mean, there's nothing I wouldn't give to have her back, but I'm just so glad that I was able to spend these years with her.
And you're on the board of Peace for Kids now. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's just so important. It's such important work. And being on the board, and I was telling my sisters how excited I was when I was asked if I would be interested in being on the board. And, my sister said to me, "Jaronna, that's so great. You found your thing." And I thought about it. I'm like, yes, this is that thing that I decided was my mission at 9 years old. This organization is that thing to do that. And I was just so appreciative in that moment, realizing that.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Some people never find their thing.
Yeah, I know. But I think that's why I've always just, in kids in general, I've always want to make sure kids are happy. And, that kids know that they're important and that they're loved and that they matter. That's just always been a thing with me. And I think kids feel that from me. I'm always that auntie where kids, I'm going to Auntie Jay's house and we do activities, we cook, we bake,
We might already have covered this because you've been so forthcoming, and I thank you for that. It's really important for people to know the real stories of kids who have spent time in care. But what is the one thing or things that is true about you that people wouldn't know unless you told them?
I really think they wouldn't know that I was in care, and that I was at one time put up for adoption, and that to this day, legally on paper, I have no parents. Wow. And I say that because, not to brag or be boastful, but I say that because when I become like with colleagues and coworkers, and I become close enough to where I share a little bit of my story, everyone just seems astounded. Like, are you serious? I would have never guessed that about you. And then that makes me think, okay, so what does that mean, that if you're in foster care, you're supposed to like have a certain way about you? But I just take that as part of me living my life to want to be a good person and do good, and not allowing my circumstance to dictate a bad life. But I don't think they would know that. Like, I was sharing it with a colleague of mine not long ago, and she goes, wow, I had respect for you before, but now I really have such a deeper, higher level of respect for you now that I know that about you.
And you're a Buddhist, right?
Yes. And
How did you come to that?
well, back in Kentucky when we were living with the psychologist I was telling you about, before he died, just so you know, we completely turned our relationship around and became extremely close. Turns out he had a brain tumor all those years, and I think that was causing the erratic behavior.
Amazing, because you just said a few minutes ago that you don't hate anybody and you hated him.
When I lived there, absolutely.
Right, but it came around.
But after he and my mom got divorced, and I remember I was in college and I needed a place to stay for the summer because they had all moved out to California, I stayed with him, and we became so close that summer. And we stayed close throughout the years, even after I moved out here. Even to the point where when he was going to the hospital, probably going to pass away, he ended up getting cancer as well, in other areas. The ambulance driver called my phone. But in the Buddhist story, when my mom was there in that house, she was still severely depressed and dealing with depression. And my uncle, who had moved out to California, had started practicing Buddhism. And he started telling my mom, I want you to chant these words. I want you to chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Just keep saying it over and over again. And he would spend so much money on long distance of phone calls chanting with her over the phone. And eventually, she ended up transforming that depression. Wow. And she ended up having courage, having strength to stand up for herself. And eventually, she and my stepdad, they got divorced. But she was chanting, and he was like, I wasn't going to like help her out or anything. And then she just kept practicing this Buddhism. And then eventually, like as kids, when your mom does something, you have to do it. You don't have a choice. So we were having to go, to the meetings and stuff with her. But I remember after she got divorced and she was chanting, and because she didn't know how she was going to make it because she had been a housewife all this time. And then she said out of the blue one day, he said, I'm going to pay for your car. I'm going to give you monthly allowance. And she just became this different person from practicing. And so fast forward many years later, like all my family just started practicing. My mom, my uncle, my oldest sister, my younger sister, they were all doing Buddhism. And they used to always tell me, Jaronna, you should chant, you should practice. And I'm like, nope, as long as you're a good person and you live a good life and you do good, good will happen. You will have a good life. Good comes back to you. And so I used to say that. And then the thing that I love about this Buddhism is your ability to change your karma, right? Because, cause and effect. But this allows you to change that karma. And so that's the difference of like just living a good life, but you still have your karma to face, right? So fast track, they were practicing probably like about 15 years. And I was going through something that I didn't know how I was going to overcome this challenge. And I remember I said, you know what? Okay, they said this Buddhism works. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to chant, I'm going to test it. And I'm going to give full belief, full faith that me chanting this is going to make it work. And I swear to you the next day. Now, it doesn't always happen that way for everybody, but
really,
it was enough to get me to think, okay. And just even seeing the transformation in my family should have been enough. But there's this thing you do, what we call human revolution, when you're practicing Buddhism, and you really change like from the depths of your life, and you'll evolve to reach, what we call your Buddhahood, your awakened self. So 15 years later, I started practicing. So I've been practicing this Buddhism probably it's Nichiren Buddhism. So I belong to SGI, Soka Gakkai International, and since 2000, February 2000. Is when I joined.
I've always been very curious about it, and I appreciate hearing this because it makes me want to investigate it more.
There's a great book, Tina Turner's book, Happiness Becomes You. That's a great book to read about And she talks a lot about Buddhism in that book.
So, Jaronna, you have a son, right? Can you tell me about him?
Yeah, I do. He is 23 now.
What? No. I'm so behind.
Yeah, he...
You look like you're 12. How could you have a 23-year-old son?
Oh, well, thank you. Way older than 12, though.
Okay.
But thank you. He's 23, and he is the love of my life, and it's been one of the greatest joys, as much as it's been a struggle at times.
Right, because you're a single mom.
Single mom, and he is a very strong-willed person who definitely has his own mind. But we're very, very close. And from my past, I just always wanted to make sure that no matter what, that he knew that mom was going to always be there, and that I love him more than anything, and that's carried over to him.
Right, so if you're the baby whisperer, were you able to baby whisper him, or was he like one of those guys like, no, you're not doing that with me?
Yes, to a point, and at times it depends. I'm still mom, right? So
yeah.
baby whisper to other kids is a lot easier than your own. He's been brought up with the love of family and to have empathy and compassion for people. He's one of those people that will give a homeless person his last dollar, and he'll shake their hand and call them ma'am or sir while doing it.
That's great. Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah.
Yes, and family is really important to him. And to this day, even growing up, whenever we said bye, he's always hug me, kiss me, love you, mom, and in front of his friends. We don't...
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I mean, to this day. So
if he's listening now, what would you say?
I would just say that he's definitely my greatest treasure in this life, and that I hope that I've done him proud in raising him and the way I've lived my life, and that I'm always here. I'm always here, and I'm always going to have his back and be in his corner.
We are recording this on Martin Luther King Day, and I want people to know what your T-shirt says. I can only read part of it.
Oh, it says, let me see, Malcolm, Harriet, Langston, Maya, and Frederick.
That's right. So some very important heroes, right?
Yes, exactly.
And I think you are too. I think the journey you've taken from a very difficult childhood to be the woman and the very warm, kind, and generous person that you are now, I know has not been an easy one for you. I know this has not been easy for you to tell this story, and I really appreciate that you are willing to share it with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm just really glad that Jaronna has found her thing. She's on a mission to make sure that kids who are forced into foster care by no fault of their own, that they're going to be treated as well as other kids, because they should be. They deserve to be. They are the children of our future, and we need to protect them, nurture them, nourish them. So thank you for your work, Jaronna. If you see something, say something. If you suspect that a child's health or safety is jeopardized in any way by parents or anyone else, contact the Child Protective Services Agency in your county. 24-hour hotlines are staffed by trained social workers who will help you through the process, and you can do so anonymously. In California, you can call the Child Protection Hotline at 800-540-4000. So if you see something, say something. You might be saving a child's life. I want to thank the supremely talented Christina Apostolopoulos for her beautiful music, Eferisto. To hear more of her music, go to Spotify and Instagram at Christina Aposto. That's ChristinaAposto. I know you want to. Her stuff is really great. And thanks to my audio producer extraordinaire, Marcos Campito. I'm glad I found you. Thanks for listening, and if you like what you hear, please rate us and hit subscribe.